From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The U.S. Border Patrol has made 32 arrests at a demonstration organized by a Quaker group at the border separating San Diego from Tijuana, Mexico. Border Patrol spokesman Teron Francisco said 31 people were arrested for trespassing at Monday's demonstration, and one person was arrested for assaulting an officer. About 300 people participated in the demonstration organized by the American Friends Service Committee. The rally was also a demonstration of support for Central American asylum seekers from the migrant caravan. Our correspondent in Tijuana, Pablo Perez, tells us about it.
Well, we're still at the border between Mexico and the United States in the border state of Baja California. This is the place where 22 days ago most of the migrant caravan arrived after crossing 4,000 kilometers of Mexican soil. Well, they have been stopped here because of the impossibility to cross the border, although the CBP, the California Border Patrol, has reported that during the last few days it has detained over 2,000 Central American migrants that crossed illegally the border, and then they offer themselves they turn themselves over to the authorities, which is the legal way to ask for refugee or asylum. And well, besides, there is also strong support from Latino organizations in the state of California. And just today, a couple of hours ago, at the borderline in the place called Playas de Tijuana, or the Friendship Park, that's the name on the American side. Well, there was a demonstration by Latino organizations that were pro-migrant and tried to show their support for the migrant, the Central American and Mexican migrants that try to cross the border every day. That demonstration was stopped, crushed by the CBP and the California police that detained 20 of the demonstrators in a show of force. Let's remember that the Friendship Park has remained closed for several weeks now in order to keep people, North American people, the people living in California, away from the border fence. Now, that doesn't happen in the Mexico side, where the people can walk all over to the fence but not cross to the United States. And well, it's just another kind of show of strength from the United States government that is trying to, well, somehow prevent the Central American migrants that numbers several thousands here in Tijuana to cross. But an interesting number is that the same Border Patrol has declared that in the last month the number of detentions in the border has risen over 60%, and that's not only in California but all the border states of the United States, from Texas to California, which means that it's not only the migrant caravan but the migration from Central America is on the rise for, well, the political and economical reason that we have already mentioned several times on this channel.
2 Russian military planes have landed in Venezuela for Air Force training exercises aimed at strengthening the defensive capacities of the Latin American state. The move comes after a series of meetings in Moscow between President Maduro and President Putin to build bilateral relations. Welcoming around 100 Russian pilots and other personnel, Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino said Venezuela can defend itself when necessary, but added that the country is a maker of peace, not war.
These flight exchanges, which we are going to begin with the Operational Strategic Command of the Army, aim to raise the level of interoperability of the Russian and Venezuelan air defense systems.
The United Nations Conference on Migration has endorsed the Global Pact for Safe, orderly and regular migration. The pact was approved by 160 countries despite the withdrawal of the United States and a number of European countries who are opposed to the agreement. Here's a quick list of who voted for the pact and who opposed it.
The UN Migration Pact, aimed at improving the way the world deals with the migratory flow, was agreed in July by all 193 members except the United States. But on Monday, only 164 countries signed the final agreement. The US was the first government to reject the proposal last year. Since then, Australia, Austria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Latvia, Poland, and Slovakia have also pulled out of the process. Among the Latin American countries, Chile and the Dominican Republic have voted against the agreement. Meanwhile, Bulgaria, Estonia, Italy, Israel, Slovenia, and Switzerland are still undecided on whether to agree to the new pact. The United Nations estimates there are about 258 million migrants in the world, or just over 3% of the world's population.
Social and political organizations have marched in Paraguay's capital, Asunción, against human rights violations. Demonstrators have commemorated the International Day of Human Rights. They condemned human rights violations on indigenous communities, campesinos, and women. Activists also denounced social activists still suffer persecution in the country. This December 10 marks the Universal Declaration of Human Rights' 70th anniversary, still facing many challenges. The document was approved by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris, France. It includes 30 articles with basic human rights. By that time, the world had suffered 2 world wars, a Great Depression, and the genocide of Jewish people. Now the world faces other challenges, such as climate change and migration.
And helping activists in their campaigns.
We now go to France, where President Emmanuel Macron has promised to raise the minimum wage and speed up tax cuts in response to the fiery Yellow Vest protests that have rocked the country. Macron issued the assurances in a televised address to the nation in a bid to quell riots. He has pledged to cut taxes for pensioners and raise the minimum wage in January, but Macron has refused to bring back a wealth tax, saying it will only drive the rich out of the country. It was Macron's first public comments after the 4th consecutive weekend of nationwide anti-government demonstrations that turned violent.
I'm asking the government and the parliament to do all that's necessary for all of us to have a better quality of life. From the beginning of next year, the minimum wage will increase 100 euros per month from 2019, without this representing extra expenditure from employers. I'm asking all of those employers who can to give a bonus to all their workers for the end of the year. This bonus will not be charged to employees.
Meanwhile, several high school students have been arrested in Paris when they were trying to block access to a high school. Some of them were handcuffed by security forces who also fired tear gas against other students. Last week, students also blocked access to high schools across France to protest education reforms and to join the Yellow Vest protest. Our correspondent in Paris, Sergio Rodrigo, brings us more details.
Here in the streets of Paris, more than 300 people have been detained by more than 8,000 security forces deployed across the city. They have blocked all the entrances to the Champs-Élysées. Hundreds of protesters are trying to continue marching, but the barricades set up by the police are blocking them. Thousands of people have flooded the streets to demand the resignation of President Emmanuel Macron and to reject his neoliberal measures and budget cuts. Security forces have used tear gas against the protesters who tried to reach the Arc de Triomphe, which has become a symbol for the Yellow Vest protesters. Students, railway workers, and ambulance drivers have also joined the protest against Macron's measures. According to the latest polls, there is a massive rejection by the French population. Only 20% of the people supports his administration.
Thank you, Sergio, for that report. The British Prime Minister Theresa May has postponed the parliamentary vote on Brexit scheduled for this Tuesday. May made the decision after it became clear that she will not be able to secure a majority. The Northern Ireland border is one of the main issues MPs disagree on, and the EU's president has called for a Brexit summit for this Thursday, but he is making it clear that the bloc will not renegotiate the deal.
The House to hear it with courtesy and for the avoidance of
Pro and anti-Brexit demonstrators have protested after May's announcement. Dozens of protesters gathered outside Parliament waving banners and chanting slogans. Both sides say they are against the postponement of the Brexit vote.
So I think putting the deal, the decision off, is just going to make it worse, because there's going to be further uncertainty, further instability, and we've basically got a weak and rudderless government at the moment, and what we need is some kind of resolution, some way forward.
I think it's a poor show. I think she should crack on with it now. She's promised she'd do it. She's backtracking again. I personally would now like to see the vote go ahead. I'd like to see her lose the vote. I'd like to see her then resign, and I'd like a new leader of the Conservative Party.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Social organizations in Argentina warn of mobilizations if the state doesn't solve the housing deficit in the country. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Roth, has the story.
Social organizations have condemned this housing deficit in Argentina, saying 1 million more homes need to be built, not only demanding the construction of more houses, they also are demanding the state update the price of construction materials to reflect current inflation in the country. Social organizations met with the housing secretary and made an agreement to update prices this week. However, the organizations have agreed that if there is no response soon, they will take to the streets.
A federal court in Brazil has given it the green light to a takeover of Embraer, the country's top plane maker, by the U.S. giant Boeing. The $3.8 billion tie-up between Embraer and Boeing was proposed in July. Last week, a group of lawmakers from the Brazilian Workers' Party won an injunction to stop the deal going ahead immediately. A higher court has now overturned that injunction, allowing Boeing to buy 80% of Embraer. Protests have been called across Brazil to demand the release from prison of the former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. To coincide with the demonstrations, an international conference in defense of democracy is happening in Sao Paulo. The event brings together leaders of the Brazilian Workers' Party, including Dilma Rousseff, with representatives of other left-wing movements in Latin America and beyond. The PT president says she's confident Lula will be freed by Christmas.
This event is important for Brazil and the world because it shows the affront against Brazilian democracy. Brazilian democracy is suffering for the injustice that President Lula is suffering. That's why we need the national and international media to cover the threats that we see in our democratic system.
The largest favela in Sao Paulo is home to the Heliópolis Community Radio, a station which features music and news, as well as information on public health and human rights. Let's take a look at this project.
87.5 is Radio Heliópolis FM. Call 22727906. Ask for a song, ask for your hit, make a complaint, talk to us.
Heliópolis, home to some 100,000 residents, is the largest favela in São Paulo. Since 1992, when members of the local LGBT community started a pirate radio station, it has also become known as one of the most gay-friendly neighborhoods of its kind in the Americas.
We always correct each other when we hear things that sound homophobic. We say, "Opa, stop, that's not funny."
We've worked a lot to fight against homophobia, to accept others the way they are. So me and my friends, for example, don't even joke around about it. We don't make homophobic jokes.
Radio Heliopolis went on to become the first legal community radio station in São Paulo, and its transmission signal, broadcast from a 30-meter tower in the middle of the neighborhood, now reaches a geographical area with a population of 800,000. For the past 26 years, Radio Heliopolis has featured music and local news mixed with information on public health and human rights, much of it centered on LGBT issues, and local residents have called in to complain about incidences of homophobia in the neighborhood. The publicity that this generated led to significant decreases in prejudice in Heliopolis. Now followers of right-wing extremist President-elect Jair Bolsonaro have started harassing trans women, gays, and lesbians in São Paulo. Jairo Barbosa is one of the station founders. She says that the attitude of the president-elect in relation to the LGBT community encourages increases in homophobic behavior.
The new president is in favor of the extermination of the LGBT population. He's very clear about this. So we, trans people, are very anxious and worried about what is going to happen.
Jair Bolsonaro will take office this January 1st. In São Paulo, this is Brian Mir reporting for Telesur.
In Peru, a referendum has taken place this weekend. Our correspondent in Lima, Veronica Insausti, brings us the details.
The result of this referendum represents a big slap in the face to the Peruvian political class. More than 85% of the people have voted against immediate re-election of current legislators. There will be no bicameral Congress. The proposal was to create two chambers with 130 representatives in one and 50 in another. However, citizens don't want more congressmen. On the other hand, more than 85% of the people said yes to the proposal of supervising the financial of political organizations and parties, especially after the money laundering scandals rocking the main political parties, as with the Popular Force Party, headed by Keiko Fujimori, who was detained after money laundering accusations. Former President Alan Garcia is under investigation, having been linked to similar accusations, as well as other former presidents, Ollanta Humala and Pedro Pablo. All the political parties in Peru have been financed by illicit funds. These four reforms, supported by Peruvian citizens, will be sent to Congress to be discussed, and President Vizcarra will call for an extraordinary session next week.
Now to Chile, where the government has announced it won't sign the United Nations Pact on Safe and Regular Migration. Our correspondent Paola Dragnit in Santiago has more on this story.
It has now been confirmed that Chile won't sign the United Nations Pact on Migration. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera said he rejected the agreement because it goes against the country's internal migration policies. This year, President Piñera has introduced some controversial new regulations targeting migrants. Human rights organizations have criticized him for deporting undocumented migrants in groups, flying them back to Haiti and Colombia, for example. Piñera also said that the pact didn't clearly define which migrants are legal and which are considered illegal. His remarks further confirm the fact that Piñera's government simply doesn't consider migration a human right.
Jamaica's government is looking forward to a resolution with Petrojam and Venezuela in buying back Jamaica's 49% stake in the oil refinery. While hailing the strong bond between the two countries, Prime Minister Andrew Holness says Petrojam has become a fiscal risk.
We have offered to buy back the 49% shares from our friends in Venezuela. Venezuela has always been very good to us. Whether it is the San Andreas Accord or Petrocaribe. The people of Venezuela have always reached out to Jamaica. The basis of that, of course, is that their own liberator and founder, Simón Bolívar, spent some useful time here. So there is a very strong bond between Jamaica and Venezuela. But as it is now, with this transaction between Jamaica and Venezuela, Petrojam in its present state, with the present market conditions, the presence of sanctions, the present geopolitical issues, Petrojam is at risk.
A big sum of cash has been stolen from the Piarco International Airport in Trinidad. The island's national Caribbean Airlines has confirmed the incident. In a brief statement, the airline says the undisclosed sum was removed by a man pretending to be a G4S security officer. The matter is being investigated by the TNT Police Service. The second gastronomic festival has been held in Nicaragua's capital, Managua.
2 days of gastronomy, dance, an exhibition of local products, and other cultural elements that have come from countries like Thailand, New Zealand, Spain, Guatemala, and the host country. The event attracted thousands of families, both Nicaraguan and foreign.
We are very happy. People seem very pleased. They are enjoying the variety of flavors. This is an occasion to get together and share.
Flags, music, and a family environment is what this cultural party has to offer. Palestine was also present with more than 80 different dishes, from the well-known shawarma to other prepared foods.
Those of us from Palestine are trying to bring our culture and show it to the whole world. Since we are not allowed in many other places due to the occupation, we are here presenting all kinds of Arab food. Well, not all of it, but a great deal of it.
Officials from the Ministry of Tourism said that this festival seeks to unite countries. Apart from the dishes, different articles from each country and touristic information can be found.
We are dedicating this festive season of peace, of goodwill, as it's Christmas. It ought to be a moment for families to come together, and we want people to come together. That's what is important.
This free event also featured salsa competitions, with prizes related to tourism, with the participation of 25 countries.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Madagascar presidential candidates Marc Ravalomanana and Andry Rajoelina took part in a televised debate on Sunday night ahead of the second round of the elections in the country. In 2009, elected President Ravalomanana was forced to leave the presidency after a series of violent protests supported by Rajoelina, who was then installed at the head of a non-elected executive by the army. Banned from the 2013 election as part of an agreement to end the crisis, the two rivals have not hidden their willingness to settle their score in the poll on December 19. Rajoelina won the first round of voting with almost 40% of the vote.
Andry Rajoelina was the leader of the 2009 protest that led to a coup in 2009. It is because of the coup that the Malagasy people have since been plunged into poverty.
Every time I have a debate with President Ravalomanana, I'm surprised that he always talks about the past, while the Malagasy people expect solutions from us now. What are you going to do to save the country? What is your program to save the country?
Thousands have protested in Copenhagen against the Danish government's plan to move foreign criminals to a small remote island previously used for animal disease search. The plan is part of a new finance bill for 2019 and seeks to transfer up to 100 migrant criminals to the small island. These people cannot be transferred back to their home countries in fears of torture and or execution. The plan was agreed upon by the center-right government and the right-wing populist Danish People's Party.
We've grown up on stories of how Danes during Second World War saved Jewish refugees and brought refugees to safety. And now we are facing a government that's actually deliberately coercing and attempting to pressure refugees back into the same conflicts that sent them here to begin with.
And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telsurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.